Okay. So thank you all for joining me and doing this thing. So we have here, I'm going from top to bottom. I don't know if you see it in that same order. I'll go this way, really. So we have Shafi Goldwasser, Tal Malkin, Elette Boyle, and Yael Kalai. And we're going to be talking about all kinds of questions and answers, basically giving advice or not advice or life experience or something like that. Okay, so how do you write a research paper? A good one.
First of all, you have to do the research.
Yeah, that's an important part, right?
First of all, you have to do the research and have a result.
Yes. So I skipped the first question, really, which was, how do you find a research problem to work on?
Oh, that's the tough one.
Yeah, that's why I skipped. I thought we won't know the answer, so we might go to the easy one after we solve the problem.
So actually, I have two things to say about that. One thing to say is just sometimes just opening your eyes and looking around you brings forward research problems. Just kind of looking at the world and thinking of what's missing brings forward research problems. And I think a lot of kind of research agendas started in this way. Another thing, which is I feel like has been worked well with students that I've worked with and also for myself, is it's very important to work on problems that you're passionate about. So in my opinion, what distinguishes people who have great work and people who have kind of mediocre work is not kind of how smart, whatever that means, they are, but how excited they are. And kind of when you're excited and kind of caught up, kind of caught on something, you can't sleep at night. That's when I think progress happens. So I think it's very important to kind of think with yourself, when you wake up in the morning, you stare at the piece of paper, what do you want to think about? Like, where does your mind take you? And go with that. So, I mean, I'm saying a little bit, not contradictory, but very different things. On the one hand, look what people are looking for, look what the world is looking for, and you'll see a lot of questions out there to work on. But then which one to choose or which direction to go, it needs to come from your heart, not from whatever, your advisor tells you or, what your friend does, or it needs to come really from within. Otherwise, I think that increases the chances of solving it.
So, Yael, I have a comment, just an answer to Tal, but also a question to you afterwards. So my comment is how I find research problems sometimes, it's kind of a combination of the two things Yael said maybe, is when you read a paper, if it's a paper I'm interested in, I don't just read it, but I stop and think, what would I do? Or I read the first line in the introduction, I think, oh, wait, so what is the question here? And what would I do? And then they often do something else, or they phrase the questions differently. And then I think about it deeply, like, why is the way I thought about it not make sense, not interesting, too difficult? And somehow when you think like this, but this is only possible if you're actually interested in the paper, then questions come up like, yeah, I have a different way to think about it, or somehow this is the right way to do things, or there's a clear gap, not a gap that the authors write at the end, open problems, but somehow just how would I go about it? And then even if there's no research problem that comes out from it, I understand better the paper and get more out of it. But Yael, I have a question to what you said. Let's say somebody is not excited, who wakes up in the morning and doesn't want to look at the paper. Like, how do you become excited, like think about it in the shower, can't sleep at night? I ask you because a student asked me that recently. And not just Yael, I wonder what you all would say about that. Like, is it just happened to you, or did you develop it in some way?
I feel like sometimes you get excited, not just by the problem itself, you get excited by the setting. So, I think excitement is very helpful. Okay, I think it brings out a lot of good, but you can be excited, just because you're in a vacuum with your own research problem and, that's what excites you. You can be excited because you're working with your advisor and you want to impress them. You can be excited because you're working with a fellow student that you want to impress. You can be just excited because you're working with people that, like, the group has some excitement and kind of it's So sometimes you need to kind of put yourself, and it's not just the problem itself, it's which community you're in. You need to think how to maneuver in a way that you find a place that's really good for you. And I think science is not the only factor here. I think human factor is also a very big factor. I have to say, for me, a lot of my motivation comes from, I want to, especially if I work with students, I want them to succeed. I work a lot because I'm dying to make it to the deadline, because I want them to have the paper ready for their deadline. Or so I think it's a setup as well helps with that.
Actually, if I can jump in, a couple of things. First of all, this interaction with people, for me, it's tremendous. I really realized this during COVID, when we weren't having meetings and stuff. It was much harder for me to get excited about things. And I think I didn't even really realize this. But the combination of talking and bouncing ideas back and forth and joking around with people and wanting to solve these things really does kind of direct the path. So for example, I'm also, I think everybody in some sense is also kind of affected by the collaborators that they have. You kind of go in different directions.
Right.
Another thing, which is not an answer to any of these questions, but sort of fits in here, is that so choosing research problems, it's something that when I was a student, it just it seemed very hard for me. How do you choose something? How do you know what seems interesting or plausible for solving? And I don't really know what happened, and unfortunately it's not a very good answer, but I think in some sense it just naturally, once you see this process multiple times and you start becoming more of the expert in some area, it becomes very natural. Like you see a paper and you think, oh wow, I want to solve these things. So maybe just one thing at least to say is that if it's not happening to you now, don't panic that it's something that sort of all of a sudden just happens without realizing it. That you start getting through this process.
So the question you asked is, how do you write a good research paper? And I want to say that there are many types of research papers. So there's not one good type, and there's many type of research problems if we go one step further. So to give you two different examples, one example is, let's say you are in some field that hasn't even started, where there is no prior papers to read in order to understand what you want to improve. But so where does that start from? Obviously, it doesn't start from a vacuum. I mean, everything starts from something. So it could be that you've heard a lecture that had some inspiring result that was described, or you took a class which had a grain of an inkling of an idea that the example that came to my mind was this example of Lewis transfer that actually Yael Rabin is responsible for, where it's a mechanism which really, if you think about it, it's very unusual and makes little sense, where you can sort of transfer a bit from one party to another without knowing which bit came across, whether it's a 0 or 1. And it turns out that this primitive is extremely important for cryptographic protocols. But why he thought about it originally? Was it to solve a specific problem? Was it just an interesting, curious mechanism of transfer of information? So that's an example of a problem that seems like a toy problem. Another example is tossing a coin over a telephone. Again, it's an example of a toy problem, which doesn't necessarily have an application. It's not that someone asked it before. It's not that you're improving a previous solution, but in our field at least, it's a real world phenomenon. It's something that we know from the physical world that we're trying to implement using mathematics or emulate it using mathematics. This is one type of problem, which, probably these days, maybe in machine learning, these are the type of problems that people are thinking of. If we think about GANs or something, trying to generate data or generate data similar to data that you see in nature. But another type of problem, which comes up a lot in theoretical computer science, would be where things have been defined already, but you want to improve the parameters of the problem. And when I say parameters, I don't mean it in a bad way, I mean in a good way. So let's say a approximation hardness parameter, or maybe the size of a proof, versus the number of queries that you make to the proof and so forth. And that's a much more classical maybe way of defining a problem. And that would lead it to a very different kind of paper. So when you say what makes a good research paper, how do you write a good research paper, depends which type, which bucket you fall in. You write the paper also very differently, I would think. And I think that's all I said.
I have something to say about Shafi's thing because I actually wanted to say another way to do research, but then thought it's really Shafi's way, so I can't say anything. I'll wait for her to speak. And you touched upon it, but I want to emphasize it more. So I remember when I was, not actually throughout my career, not just as a student, but every time I sit with you, Shafi, in a talk, we finish the talk, and Shafi has about 1,000 open problems. Why do you do that? Let's try to do that. Why did they do this model? This is the wrong model. If you try this model, so I guess my point is, and it relates to what Tal said, whether you're reading a paper or you're going to a talk or you're going to a lecture, if you think critically, you'll see that there's a lot of open problems there that are very interesting. Like, why is that the right choice of model? Is that, just think, is this definition, is it the right one? Maybe it doesn't capture something. Or just really critical thinking really opens up a lot of open problems.
Okay. So was there a time when you thought that you couldn't do it, you couldn't get a result or do something? And what was a turning point that suddenly things started to happen and you were able to solve the problem?
First of all, yeah.
I was just joking.
First of all, what?
My answer.
All the time.
First of all, of course, yeah. For me, at least, multiple times along the way, especially at the beginning, before you really cross over some sort of threshold. And research is hard. It's a hard lifestyle, I think, at least, because most of the time you're stuck. And you have to sort of really, this is one of the reasons why it's so important to choose a topic that you're interested in, that you want to find the answer. It's not just I feel like I need to solve this. Yeah, I think in some sense that it does take sometimes stepping away from something. Sometimes you're so, deep into one direction or one path, and it just seems like a dead end, and it's very frustrating, and it's hard. So take some time off, or kind of think about something else, or think about try to come up with some totally different approach to things. It's really it's rough, and you're going to keep hitting these walls, and it's really about bouncing around and coming up with different approaches and sticking in with it, I think.
But Tal, you asked about have we ever been stuck and then there was a turning point and we solved it. So anytime we solve something is after being stuck. We're many times stuck with no turning point,
Yes.
and we're still stuck. And maybe there's going to be a turning point in the future. Maybe there won't. It's not everything you try to solve, you solve. Some things you don't. And maybe someone else solves them. And then maybe you build on that. So, but I agree completely with Elette that you need to be comfortable with the idea that you're stuck. But another thing I think one needs to distinguish between being stuck but making progress and being stuck. So being stuck but making progress means when the day ends, you understand something better. You learn something. Okay, something changed in you. And you're the way you understand the problem, the way you see the problem. I don't define that as stuck. So even if you think about the same problem for a long time, you didn't solve it and you moved on, I don't feel like you were stuck. I feel like, no, you learned things. And whatever you learned will come, it will serve you. It's thoughts that it can be on this project, can be another project. Stuck means you wake up in the morning, you stare at your paper and you're blank, like nothing comes. It's like you're really stuck. Then it's a good time for sure to back up, but I think people sometimes mistake and feel like, oh, they don't have a result to write, like they don't have a theorem to state, means that they didn't make progress. And I think that's really incorrect. Progress is made by understanding things. That's progress. Not even if you don't have a paper, that doesn't mean like you didn't have progress. If the only time we have a progress is when we have a paper, then really we're not doing anything. Most of the time we're not making progress, but it's not true.
Just one quick thing to add to that, if I can, that sometimes it can be helpful to write down some of the stuff that you learned, even just some notes in concrete, because then there's something there and you see, look, I did make progress, and there's something to point to that you understand that you're not just totally stuck.
And also the actual act of writing sometimes helps you understand
Yes.
better and see more. And also like later, I at least forget things very quickly.
Oh yeah.
So later you can go back and read it and revisit
Yeah.
it later.
If you
even
remember
years
where you
later.
wrote it.
I think, I think talking it out. Also, you said you asked what gets you unstuck. I think talking it out with someone else, especially if it's a collaborator, sort of explaining the way you were thinking, where you got stuck. People may ask you a question even that will clarify a lot for you. Yeah.
Do you think that this thing that you're saying is a little bit a privilege of people who are a little bit more established, but that when you're a student and you need that paper. It's not just, you're not just trying to learn and build more and more, you also want the publications. What do you do in that case?
So what is a privilege? The fact that it's not so bad to get stuck, or that you can talk it out? What are you asking?
No, the privilege is that even if months on months go by where the only thing that's happening is that you're learning things, for a student, it's difficult because they need the actual papers.
Well, this issue about the students needing actual papers is a real problem. I think that's it's a major problem in the field, and I think it's much worse than when I was a student, for sure. I mean, of course, everybody wants to make progress, especially early on when you think that progress is impossible. But today, I understand that they are expecting from themselves to have really many papers. Like I think in certain fields, people graduate with 20, 30 papers. Now, one should pay a lot of attention, and when that happens, yeah, in machine learning, for example, is that there's many co-authors on the papers. It's certainly not a single person that's responsible for such a large body of work. But regardless of why this happens, I think this is a huge problem that people are so concerned, because people are, they're busy all the time comparing themselves to everybody else. And the length of CVs or people graduating has been growing exponentially. And of course, nobody pays attention to the fact is the number of collaborators has also been growing. So it's not that you really sat down and wrote all these papers as a graduate student. You're part of a group. And then this, of course, means that people in institutions with a lot of students and they're strong groups, they're in better shape. But if you're an institution with a very few students, you're working on your own, you can't expect to have lots of papers. And you're always incredibly aware of how other people are doing. I cannot imagine a bigger problem. So the only piece of advice I have is that if you're an advisor and you have a student and they're a starting student, then without a paper is to get them to be a co-author on a paper by finishing the problem. Or maybe it's a problem where you know already what the solution is going to be, or you hope that you know what the solution is going to be, you say, let's work on it together. I know this has happened with me multiple times as an advisor. I think once you have the first paper, you know it can be done and it's not as terrifying. But that first paper is crucial. So that's the only, I don't see any other shortcut. Some people somehow naturally, they solve a problem because, I don't know, it's really up their alley, they're lucky, they've worked with some other students. But often that's just too difficult because you're paralyzed with fear. We know that fear and that's the biggest inhibitor of making any kind of progress in life, So why would this be really different?
I think we should also try to somehow change the culture. I agree it's a big problem. And Tal, you're right about the privilege. Yeah, it's better, like in an ideal world, that people don't think about the pressure to publish so much. And I think now this pressure is bad. Like even the people who succeed, they often like rush to publish. It's not thought out well, it's not written well, or it's like small units of publishing. And I don't know what to say. On one hand, it creates a competition where you in fact need to do this in order to compete with someone else, which is a huge problem, I agree. But in terms of being stuck, you could try to have more than one question. I don't know, it depends on your style. I've had students who thrive on having 100 questions they alternate between and something makes progress. For me personally, this is not a good approach. It's hard for me to multitask like that. But you can have 2 or 3 problems. And then if you're stuck on one, you can switch to another. Or even if you're stuck on one, like about the progress and what Yael said, I agree completely. But sometimes you can get some partial result out of it that might be worth publishing, or you might solve something a little different than what you intended to. Like, you could try to strategize and get publications out of it, but I don't know. I think the advice that we need is how to change the community, how to change this culture, and I don't have good advice for that. I agree, it's a big problem.
Yeah, I agree with both of you. I want to say it's a bit related to the point I said before. I think sometimes changing collaborators can help with that. So sometimes you can work with someone, sometimes the role of people in projects is very different, and your role with one group is different from your role with another group. For example, some people are really good at being pessimistic, like the role is as pessimists. You're like, oh, here's an idea that won't work, and
No,
they
because
really
of this
guide
yeah.
you. Yeah, and it really guides you to get the right solution. And maybe on their own they're just going to be pessimists and get nowhere. But when they're sitting next to an optimist who's kind of, every time and being a pessimist is very hard. You need to be extremely smart to understand why ideas won't work. I'm actually really not good at that. So I think you can. Sometimes you hit like a good match with someone, and then kind of exactly what you're missing to solve. In general, sometimes in general research, you can be very strong in one thing, but alone something will be missing or makes it harder. But then you find someone that exactly has kind of another style that's exactly complementary to you, and then all of a sudden things go really well. So I think that also helps. But I want to also say about being stuck, and also related to what Shafi said about fear. I think that's a huge thing. And Tal, when you said about being stuck, I remember actually one of my first papers, not in master's, but as a PhD. I was sitting in a paper. I worked with Shafi and the future meal, and we tried something, and we thought it almost worked, but no, it doesn't work. And then we tried again, and it doesn't work. And after a while, I was like, "There's no way it's going to work." Like I was so pessimistic. And then I remember Shafi went somewhere to the Far East or something. I don't remember. It was China or something. And I remember before you left, I felt like, so. What are we going to do? Because I felt so stuck. And I remember Shafi's like, I'm sure you're going to solve it, but I'll be back. And I felt like after she said that, I felt like, okay, I have to solve this. And then we solved it. So, but my point is, I think if I didn't have like this kind of vote of confidence, I think at that point, I would have given up. So I think fear is an inhibitor, and it's important to acknowledge it, and do whatever you can to get it out of your way.
I think, I guess we've sort of gone a different path here, but this is really important. I think there's something about like creativity just drops. I think when you lose the confidence, you lose the feeling like, okay, in order to solve something, you really need to approach it as like, okay, let's do this. Yeah. I'm gonna think about these things and I'm gonna solve it. As soon as you feel like you're really behind, or you don't have anything, or you're stuck, it's really hard to come up with new ideas and to actually make progress. So this is when I mentioned before, like kind of taking a step back or thinking about other things. This is really important, at least for me, to try to regain like, okay, yeah, I'm back into this, and let's do this without really going kind of in a negative direction.
And I want to make a recommendation. It's really good to take a bath when you're in
with bubbles.
You see, you're from the Odette school of thought.
That sounds like Odette, right?
Well, no, Odette copies me as far as I'm concerned. So you take a bath, okay, and you just lie there and just let your thoughts go, take you wherever they want to go. And somehow, often that just kind of, some resolutions come up. And one of those resolutions might be a solution, or just, you know what, I can do this. I'll just try to think about it from the beginning, see what doesn't make sense, see where it's stuck, see what it means, without fear. Fear is like, it's insane. Somebody should do it. It's crazy.
For me, I try to work in a different location or somewhere that I feel like I'm hiding, or like people aren't expecting me to be thinking this is like on my own time, and now I am free. I don't have pressure of people like trying to think about what's your progress or something. I really have to pull myself somewhere I kind of isolated, not even physically, but kind of mentally.
Yeah. So actually, Elette, what you're saying is right. I think there's two ways to go about it. Okay, so we're saying, oh, fear is not good, but then someone can say, okay, but I have fear, so what do I do now? Like,
Right.
but I want to say two things. So there's many ways. One is what Shafi said, just take bath, take it easy, and Another thing, what Elette said, sometimes what
A hot bath.
hot bath, or be by yourself, kind of. Don't let But another way is actually to use the
Cold
really
shower.
great
Yeah, and the
community.
cold showers.
Showers.
The
I don't get any
opposite.
ideas in my cold showers, but maybe I'll start trying the bath. But no, I think another approach is to rely on the community you're in. Sometimes you're in a great community and you can use that. Especially, I don't know if it's what I'm saying now is not only to students, but also all of us. Sometimes we're high, sometimes we're low in all aspects of our life, and relying on the people around you and the community around you is very helpful. And whether you're a student or not, sometimes you have someone next to you who feels actually they're confident, and maybe you can try to work with them. Maybe you'll get some confidence back, and then you'll be back on the horse. So and also know that we all have periods where we're not confident. It's life, so it's the fact that you're feeling scared and not confident and feeling like there's no way you can succeed. Know that all the people you admired probably had that phase at some point. I think that's an important thing to keep in mind.
Okay. So another question, how do you manage your time? There's some excellent people on this call to address this question. And the question is, first of all, within the work, when do you do research, do other things that you need to do, committee work, things like that? And then also between work and other things that you want to do, what time management do you do? Tal, do you want to start?
Yeah, I'm a big expert on time management.
Exactly.
So my first advice is don't do anything at all until the very last minute. No, really, I mean, time management is my hardest problem. It's really hard. I'll say something about the second question you said about between work and not work. I strongly believe that you should not feel like you have to be consumed by work. So I guess our job, this is both an advantage and a disadvantage, which is it's not a 9-to-5 job. And I guess there's some people I know who did make it into a 9-to-5 job, but I am not able to. And this goes both ways. So, I do take days off, which are intentionally days off with no work at all, either to do some concrete, amazing, fun things, or even just to relax and do nothing. And I think that's fine. But I also find myself working in the weekend and at nights, and it's indeed hard. I don't know what advice I would give, but I think I think the worst thing to do is to both not work and feel horribly guilty about it. I think it's better not to be guilty about it and to do, I think vacation, time with family, time to rest, time with friends, whatever, is all very important, even for work. So you should not feel pressed to work all the time. Work is hard to not think about, and so I don't know, I'm very deadline oriented, which I don't think is a good thing. So my advice is not to be deadline oriented, to plan everything in advance and do it. But it's hard for me. I guess at this point I learned to forgive myself. And, I'm strong in some things and weak in others. And time management is one of the weaker parts. So I'm interested to hear what other people say.
Okay. But you didn't address, okay, I'll let others speak and then we'll see about addressing in the work, what to do and not what to do.
Oh, how to, yeah, I do have something to say, what not to do. So one thing is, it took me a long time, but I think everybody gives this advice today, and I agree with it strongly, which is learn to say no to things. I literally remember the first time I said no to something. It was like I was invited to a program committee. I remember the first time I said no, and it was so hard for me. And now I think about it, the reason I said no is I was due with a baby around the time of the work. This is such an obvious no, but it was so hard for me to say no. And also I was old by then, so I really never said no no before that, which is a problem. Now I say no a lot. So one big advice is to say no. And the other advice is within work, how to decide whether you do committee work or this or this or that. It often, the bad thing is you just, whatever happens, you do, like somebody pressuring you, you got an email, there's something. I think the better thing to do is to think for yourself and make your own priorities instead of just doing whatever happens. So these are two things not to do, which is not to say yes to everything and not to just do what happens, but think a little bit what your priorities are.
So actually, I have something that you, Delindel, just told me in GTAX a couple, like a week ago or so ago, which is so, I found so helpful. He said, here's when I say yes. If I'm asked to be in a committee, but that didn't start in 6 months, but started today or tomorrow, will I say yes or no? And if I would say no, I'm not, I'm not going to have more time in 6 months. Time doesn't kind of generate itself. So think about, what if you were asked to do it like in a week or two? Would you say yes or no? And because it's very easy to think, oh, it's in 6 months, by then I'm going to be done with my deadlines and, my projects will be over. And of course, just things pile up. But I wanted to say also something not related. I think it's very important to understand.
But Yael, then the answer would always be no, because I never have time. So, but you do have to contribute to the community. First of all, to contribute to the community, because you send paper to conferences, you need to review papers also. But not just because of that, but also because it's good for you. It's a learning experience. It forces you to read. It's good on your CV for various things. So
I'll tell you what.
That advice
there are things like writing letters, which I feel is my job, and I cannot say no to. I mean, depending on the person, and it's very, very important for somebody's career.
Yeah, these are, you can't say no to. So some things you just can't say no to. But I think also you need to be aware that if you say yes now, something else may come up soon that you would, I guess let me give us a setting that you need to keep in mind. Maybe you're asked to be on some program committee that you don't really want to be on, but you feel like, okay, but I should be on a program committee. But keep in mind that there's a chance that in 2 months, and for each person it's different, right? But you just need to keep in mind that you'll be invited to a different program committee, that you want more. And then you need to keep in mind that, like, to prioritize things and think you need to think essentially probabilistically, right? You need to think, I need the recording. You need to think kind of probabilistically. See, that's work-life balance.
It's great. I think it's fantastic. Me with the not working internet, you with the kids.
Here, a kid in the background. I'll hide her. But what I wanted to say also, which is related to your question, I think it's very important to understand for each person their own, what's their strengths and weaknesses. So for example, for me, I know that I'm most productive, like I'm most crisp and clear thinking in the morning. And I try to make sure that the 3 hours of my from the morning, the first 3 hours, I have no meetings. I don't always succeed, but I really try. And to the extent that I'll wake up at 6 a.m. to make sure that I have my 3 hour, window to work, to think. And there's some work that requires less you need to be less,
Sharp, focused?
Sharp. Yeah, sharp. Thank you. A little less sharp, and some things you need to be very sharp. So, you need to organize your day in a way that work that, you can do when you're a little more tired, you'll do it then, and work where you really, really need to focus, like especially when you're, fine-tuning a proof, you do it in the time that you're most focused. And so that's something that I think is very important.
So I want to go back to something that Tal brought up, Tal Malkin, about the context switching. So I'm actually very, very good at it, and that's terrible. Because I'm so good at it, I do it a lot, and it's clearly the wrong thing to do. So I mean, my advice would be to have a whole day, at least 1 day a week, maybe 2, where you actually can just think about research and maybe, I don't know, have lunch, obviously, but not context switch. For me, that's the worst part. And of course, as a student, I think you get the privilege that you don't need to do so much context switching. As we grow more, and we have more responsibilities, there are the letters of recommendations, there are the committees, there are the students, there are the postdocs, there's the grants. It's actually, I think, one of the worst thing that academic institutions do. You know, they hire people because they're good researchers usually, and then they make them do all the stuff which they are not that good at it. And the amount of time that remains for research is very small. It makes no sense. Really makes no sense. If you think about the amount of duty that you need to do, a ratio for time to think, it makes no sense that you would necessarily get the best out of these people. So I think there are some very rare places, but some such places exist where you have tremendous staff, even staff that writes grants for you, and they know how to do it well, given the right guidance. But it's extremely rare, certainly very rare in the United States. I haven't seen it. There are claims that such things exist. But if you really think about why you particularly hired the people you hired, is for their creativity, for their ability to focus. And we have a tendency, I think as women probably more than men, but everybody has a tendency to do what's easiest. And if somebody distracts you, in some sense, it is easier to get distracted and to do what is demanded of you at that moment. So we do it, but that's not where we're going to get our best work at. So if you understand that and you believe in that, then you figure out your own schedule of how to make sure that you have quality time. And Yael, I guess, figures it out because she's a superwoman and she can get up at 6 and think till 9, but not everybody can
Yeah.
do that.
Okay, I have a couple follow-up points to some of the different things that were raised. One kind of going to the multitasking and everything. I agree with that, and also tied with how do you schedule your day. It's an important thing. Even if I have, if I have 5 hours that are free, but they're here a little bit, here a little bit there, and so forth, it's very hard to get certain tasks done, like really deep thinking research. So for me, the best times when I'm doing research are when I have, half day or a full day where I can just go and kind of think without the pressure of, oh, I need to be in this call in 20 minutes or something like this. Another point, so Tal raised this issue of the worst thing, and this is really, I think I really agree with this. The worst thing of the work-life balance is when you're not working and you're feeling guilty about it. I used to do this a lot, especially as a student and as a postdoc, where in the weekends I would constantly think, okay, I need to be working, I need to be working. And I would sort of not really be working, but I would be thinking about it all the time, like not even productively, but about the fact that I should be working. And really what
Elette,
I
I
should have
thought you
done.
worked all the time. I thought you actually worked all the time.
Well, I did work a lot for those hours when I was not working, but I think what I should have done is said, okay, I'm going to take these hours in the first part of the weekend or something like that, and I'm going to really sit and give myself a good environment, and I'm going to work, and then I've earned freedom or whatever, and then I would be able to cleanse myself of this. I would go have some fun, and it would help me recharge for the next time that I was sitting down and trying to think, instead of thinking, oh my gosh, I wasted all this time as a weekend not working. So now I'm approaching my next work session with this stress or fear. So this is something that it's a little hard to execute, I think, but it can make a big difference.
For those of you with kids on the call, how did you balance things when there were also kids that, as we know, demand their time? It's not really an option.
What do I have to say about that? Okay, is that it's very difficult. Okay, and because kids consume a tremendous amount of your energy, your emotional energy, and your time and your commitment. And even when you're working, I think that it's true for a lot of us. Certainly, was true for me. Is that if there's a problem, if there's an issue, you think about it in the back of your mind, and it bothers you, and you can't stop, and it really it's all consuming. And in the final analysis, for me, that was certainly more important than research. And so be it. So if you're lucky, you have children that don't consume all of your time. And or let's put it this way, if you're lucky, there are times when your children don't consume all of your time. That could happen before you have children. That could happen if you never have children. And that could happen because life, it's a cycle. And sometimes kids demand more and they demand less. And obviously you want the partner that you have is helpful if you have a partner. and that you have to be lucky for that too. So, that's not really advice, right? The advice is to be lucky.
Well, I think I actually have advice, which is, I agree with you, Shafi, completely, that when things are going well, it's much easier to just focus, but that's actually, I mean, it's easier to focus on research. And when there's some problem or, some worry, then all of a sudden, the focus completely shifts, which is a good thing. I mean, that's part of the good thing about our work is that, you have kind of freedom. Also, you can take the freedom to to take care of things at home if you need. But one thing that I found for me really helpful when I started having the kids is really to focus. So I had to think to myself, I can't, like, my time is limited. What is the most important thing for me? And I'm not going to waste my time. So from the moment my kids were born, first I did no cleaning whatsoever. And for example, we were the type of home that if you bought us a toy, with more than 3 pieces, it was a one-time thing, because I had no time to run and try to I like my I prioritize what was important to me, which, and therefore sometimes, my kids were not well dressed, or, their clothes, were like 2 years behind, but still they're, the age of 6 wore clothes of a kid who was 4, and so on. Or my daughter now here is in Israel, super hot. Still, she doesn't have flip-flops, work in progress. But I think for each of us, there's something that are important for us, and these I try to make sure that I do. And the rest I delegated. And when you delegate, things don't come out as perfect as you want, but you need to prioritize.
Yeah, so the house was dirty all the time.
I had a cleaning lady.
But if you can't afford one, what do you do?
I would make the house be more dirty. More dirty.
But I gotta say something. I gotta say something that having Maya on the camera a minute ago was perfect, because the point is that no matter what you do, they complain. Okay, so one has to keep that in mind. They complain anyway. Okay.
Wait, I'll go and bring Dana. I'll bring Dana.
Sure. I have to say though, it's the proof is in the pudding at the end. We have great kids, so.
But that's just because they're naturally great. They would grow on anything.
No, I doubt it.
Okay. Okay. Next question. So we did talk about kids and challenges with kids, which I think that women in the field really carry the lion's share of that. I don't think that men in our field have the same issues. They just think that somebody's taking care of the kids. But were there other issues that came up that you felt as a woman that were challenging? And we have here a huge range of years. So I think it would be very interesting to hear in early days, middle days, today, and so on.
Okay, so one thing that I've encountered as a woman, I think it's in many different levels, is that for some reason our work, maybe it's our fault because the way we portray it, or maybe it's societal, or maybe it's men's fault, but our work is not considered as serious as men's work. And what I mean by that, I think it cannot be explained better than with examples. Somehow we come off as if we don't put as much into it, or we're not as suffering, that we manage to go through life making it feel like work isn't one more thing that we do, but it's not the main thing. I don't know what it is, but guys seem to think it's reasonable to say to us things like, well, you don't work really hard. I've even heard it from my own children, that their perception is that I put so much attention on them. When do you work?
But Shafi, what about, maybe it is our fault, but in the following way, that we make everything seem so easy, because we really do so many things that it must not be hard what we do, because we take care of the kids and we do this and we do that and we do that and we work. So clearly it's not that hard.
Maybe in any case, we don't talk about it all the time. Oh, I worked so hard. It was so hard. Got up and I went to work and this is so difficult. Yeah.
Yeah, we do it. We do it.
No,
I think
but
also
not all this
sometimes
self-aggrandizing, you know.
Yeah. Sometimes I think women tend to, if anything, maybe undersell or be more timid about things, or like be shy about stuff instead of like very proud or to ask. You know, this is in a lot of different cases.
So I have some advice actually for women. So I'm just thinking, where can we take advantage of our situation? You know, the situation, you know, of life. And I think one thing that actually is a place where we can take advantage in a good way is I think there's a tendency to think of women as weaker, you know, as weak and physically weak, and also it extends. And therefore, I think people are more patient and happy to help women, and uh, and so that's a place where I think we can, you know, take advantage. And I don't know, sometimes I don't know how even like stupid examples of like I know, you know, you wasted your time on doing something, I don't, formatting something, or you know, just kind of things. Go ask someone for help, they'll help you format, you know, or whatever. You're stuck on some probability, annoying probability thing that you're kind of probably go ask, you know, use the I think in general a society is happy to help. So it's hard for me to think of exact example where you can ask for help, but maybe in some teaching, or I don't know, maybe people will be more sympathetic with weak women, you know.
The damsel in dismay. What are you saying, Yael?
What am I? What do you say?
Damsel in dismay.
I mean, I'm just thinking, should we take advantage of this? I'm not saying we should keep this situation like this, but I'm just saying, you know, we have a world we're living in. I would like to change it, but you know, I'm just thinking of practical things we can help ourselves with in today's
You know,
world.
actually, just thinking about that now, I was thinking to myself like, oh, I probably wouldn't do that. But I think in some sense, I'm push myself too far in the other direction, because like, no, I don't want to appear like a weak woman. I want to sit there and go through the pain of solving it so that I did it, even though sometimes I do it too extreme. Like I should have just asked someone for help. It could have saved me a lot of time. But I need to kind of get over that, because I feel like I still need to prove myself that I'm not a stupid woman or something like this.
So Tal,
Yes.
I don't have any advice, but I wanted to comment about whether I feel that there's some disadvantages or issues related to being a woman. So interestingly, I never felt it in the moment, like when I was a student, at all stages. I never felt it in earlier stages of my career. But now, looking in retrospect, I feel that I was disadvantaged even then. My attitude was very, I sort of ignored any issues. I felt very lucky, very happy, very supported. I had good friends. I mean, sure, I was the only woman in a huge room with many men, but somehow everything was good. I didn't feel discrimination or anything like that. But now in retrospect, that I also see a lot of things from the other side, from, you know, from faculty meetings and from, like, I see other students, my own students and other people. I see that there's a lot of influence that I just was not aware of. There are things like, you know, assuming like who did more work on some paper, for example, or things like not really hearing that, you know, I said it was my idea, not someone else's. Like I see, I'm talking about smaller things. Of course, there are like terrible, horrible things that some people do, but like the smaller things, they happen all the time, and they happen to me as well. And I certainly faced it, but somehow I didn't notice it at the time, which I don't know, maybe it's my attitude, or I feel very lucky. I was certainly very lucky and had a lot of support and everything was great. But like in retrospect, there is a lot of issues like the ones I just said, like, yeah, just assuming things. Like these are two concrete examples, assuming that the woman did less work or she knows less what's going on in some joint work, for example. This is one example, or somehow not noticing what she said and hearing someone else. These are concrete things that I see a lot, and in retrospect, they happen to me as well.
And when they happen to you now, what do you do? How do you treat them? How do you go
So
about them?
that's a good question. I go about them very differently in these two examples. So I'm still very bad at asking things and like demanding credit, or not demanding, but reminding, like, hey, by the way, did you see this amazing thing I've done? This is such a mind-blowing work. You know, it sounds like a joke, right? But like men do that somehow. I don't know. Maybe it's not men, but certainly I do that way less than other people in our community. So I don't know what I do, but I don't do anything. I don't promote my work. I don't talk about this, you know, how great I am. I don't ask for credit. So I don't know, I don't do anything. But about the voice being heard, I'm good about it. Like, I'm not shy anymore. I talk. I somehow feel much more confident. I mean, I have a privilege, you know, I'm senior, I have tenure, like everything is, you know, I've have many years of experience. So in terms of not hearing my voice and not remembering it's my idea, I don't feel that anymore, because I do shout and speak loudly and remind people. But about the credit for my work, like, I'm embarrassed to ask for things. It doesn't even occur to me, and then people do it all the time. So I'm trying to work on it. In fact, I'm trying to be more, like, you know, more go and like ask for things or say things or mention to people what I did, but it's certainly not natural, and I do it very little.
So you think now that your voice is louder, or not louder, or more affirmative and so on, you feel that it doesn't happen to you anymore, that somebody later repeats your idea and it's attributed to that person in a meeting?
I think it happens because I'm not there all the time to talk about it. And also sometimes it looks small. It's right. We're talking about small things. It's not like somebody stole my major research insight, but even like little things. And when the things are too little, it's also weird to bring them up, right? And be like, hey, by the way, I suggested this, not you. Like, who cares? So it certainly happens still. Yeah. I don't know if these are the biggest ideas, but I just found biggest problems, but I just found it interesting that in retrospect, I had a lot of issues, but as I was living it, I never did. Like, grad school was the best time ever. Like, everything was always great. So I don't know, it's probably my attitude somehow that I ignore issues because I don't want to deal with them. I don't know.
I also think that it depends on the institution you're in. So I think at MIT, I mean, I think, I'm not saying, I don't know. When I was a student at MIT, well, I was, you know, you had a Shafi as an advisor. So it feels very different, you know. I had a great experience. I didn't even think of men, women at MIT. I never thought about it wasn't.
I also didn't. I guess we all here went to MIT.
Yeah, so I didn't even,
right.
it didn't occur to me. It's only when I went to Georgia Tech, all of a sudden, this men-women thing all of a sudden became such a big deal. I was like, before that, it wasn't even on my mind. What does it matter what kind of organs you have? I don't know. I didn't think about it, you know? So I think it's also a matter of which institution. I think some places, you know, things work better. And I think MIT, at least the theory group, it's hard for me to talk about the entire institution, but, you know, where we were in, we had Shafi, and, you know, we're strong and credible women, and, you know, our advisor, it felt really, really strong and good, and that was not an issue at all. At Microsoft also, when I'm now, really not an issue. There also was always kind of led by a very strong and, you know, wonderful woman. And also now as a faculty, an adjunct faculty at MIT, I feel great. The gender thing is not an issue, but I think in many places it is. And when it is, it is mishatek. How do you say mishatek? It really paralyzing. And then it's very hard to work when you feel this. It destroys productivity. It's very, very sad. Actually, I really think it's a problem in places.
Yeah, you don't think it's I don't know, it's interesting. I had an amazing time at MIT and I felt it was so great and lovely. and yet like the word in the street is like that it's all super competitive and difficult and the students are all competing with each other. And I don't know, I never felt it. I feel like you don't think it's something just about our attitude somehow, or luck or timing, although we were in different times, so I don't know.
I do
But
think
like,
it's competitive.
just so
I
you know, the atmosphere that's supposed to be is like cutthroat, whereas I felt everybody was supportive. I had amazing friends, we all helped each other.
So
This is maybe not about the man-woman thing, but just a
yeah.
general.
So I remember I
know.
did feel competition when I was a student. I think it's better now, but when I was a student, I did feel competition, and often I didn't want to come to the lab because I felt like I'll sit in a cafe and it's been, but I didn't feel any
Rest in the
gender
cafe.
issue.
Sit in the
Rest, I
cafe
rest.
and not work, right?
Not
Sit in
work,
the
yeah.
cafe
Of course,
and
of
not
course.
work.
Yeah, so I
Elette,
like to
you were
work
saying
at the,
something, girl. What did you
what?
want to say? Elette was
Yeah,
gonna
so
say-
yeah, sorry,
Oh,
I
yeah,
said
yes,
it's
yes,
not
yes.
like I didn't feel competition. I felt a competition, but I didn't feel a gender issue. It's not the same thing.
Well,
Okay,
definitely
yeah.
MIT is a
Again,
place.
oh yeah, MIT's, yeah, again, kind of piling different things. I have to keep remembering all the different things to say. In terms of, yeah, competition, I guess also in particular at MIT, it felt competitive, but I think that most of that was my own personality. Like I felt I was, you know, you sort of naturally compare yourself to everybody else there, and everybody else is very strong. So that feels like there's a lot of pressure there that you kind of put on yourself. But people were very nice. There was never like a cutthroat sort of thing. Maybe there was something like, oh, how, you know, did you have submissions to this conference, or you know, and then you hear that everybody else has 50 submissions or whatever. But yeah, that also wasn't such a gender thing, I think, for me. Some things that so now popping the stack a bit, at different institutes, even institutes where it is very comfortable and it's not a problem, I think that there are still differences, and this is not necessarily even just a gender thing, but sort of a personality thing that tends to correlate with gender, of like not being bold and not asking or feeling kind of intimidated. That, for example, you know, I'm less likely to ask a question because I'll feel stupid. I think that that's correlated with gender to some degree. Or asking, it was amazing actually. There was one of these women in theory events that I went to, and there was some woman who was talking about these stuff, and I realized, oh yeah, this is so true. That you know, when would you ask to, or when would you apply for something, for a scholarship, or ask for letters, or ask to go to a conference? You know, I would apply for a scholarship if I felt I was really doing very well, and I didn't feel like I was at that level. But I think that was just because I was sort of downplaying my own accomplishments, and that, you know, if there was like a checklist of things that you had to satisfy, apparently there's some statistic about the fact that women would wait until every single check was there before trying to go, because otherwise it's embarrassing. Of course I'm not qualified for this. But men, you know, if they have most of them or whatever, they'd go for it. And this, I you know, I guess I can't speak to the statistics, but for me, for sure, this is true. You know, it would be embarrassing to do this, and I think that I need to get over that, and to kind of realize this is okay, and I'm not trying to be very, I don't know, that this is something that you should do actually.
So I think that it changes. So if I look at the three of you that were students at MIT, Yael, Tal Malkin, and Elette, you were at different times, and I know who your cohorts were, and they were different people. And oh, it's not the only cohort. There might be one person who's very competitive, very comparing, and knows what everybody's doing and where they're at the current rank. And I think that reflects kind of how you feel about that period. But what that means also is that this is very different in different institutions. It's very different even in the same institution at different times. And I think even at the same time, if you look at different groups, so I think when you talk about the theory group, it's a large group, even at MIT, and there are different parts of it. But the more women there are around, I think that's very clear. The more women who are respected who are around, and it's clear, it just changes everything. I mean, you see, and now I'm sitting here in this office in Weizmann. It's clear, you know, there's Irit here and Michal Irani, and you know, and they're just so strong, and there's no question whatsoever that that they kind of, you know, hold the world by whatever it is to hold it by. and there's no doubt. So and I think this is becoming more and more the case. Certainly the case. Berkeley there's very some strong women, not in the theory group in machine learning. So the other institutes that I know, of course, there's many other places, but clearly, one has to be relentless in making sure that there are more women, and that because that makes a huge difference for the graduate students. There's no question about it, right? I cannot imagine a situation where it's all men in the faculty and all of a sudden the women are just going to do it.
Shafi, this reminds me something that happened to me at MIT. I was supposed to TA for some algorithms class. And then in the last minute, I got funding, or I don't know what, I didn't need to TA. So I wanted to not TA before the class started. And the professor said, oh, it's fine if you don't TA, as long as I find a suitable replacement. Mm-hmm. And the professor's requirement for suitable replacement was, in addition to being appropriate to TA the class, be a woman. The professor wanted to find a woman. And at the time, I was very much against it. I'm like, why? Who cares? Like, etc. I mean, the professor found a woman who was good and everything was fine. This is one of the things that changed. Like, in retrospect, now I feel it's very important to have women TAs, because I see, like Elette said, the students not asking questions. They ask more questions when there are women TAs. I see that it makes a difference, but at the time I was very like, why? Who cares about this? So I think I was very naive and I didn't realize any gender issues, but they were there. They were there at the time too. Like the professor, now I think the professor was right for,
You're bringing up another issue, which is, yes, maybe they're right, but why should you as a woman have to pay the price? So there's not enough women. They're supposed to be sitting in all the committees and TAs, and then what?
Yeah.
That's another reason to get more women into the field.
But Yael, I do feel that I have to push back on your statements that there are no women issues and it's just institution dependent, that there are institutions that have them and institutions they don't. I think it's uniform across the map. All institutions have them. Students, young students now, young students then, these things come up. And I don't know, maybe you felt that you somehow managed, or you didn't want to pay attention to them. But I think to come and say that there was a place that didn't have them is not the case, even in your time.
It may be, I don't know. I have to say, currently at MIT and in Microsoft, it's not something that I'm thinking about or aware of.
So
I don't know.
Let's say about MIT, maybe not about the theory group, about the small group.
Oh, no, I'm sorry.
No,
I'm not talking about MIT. Sorry.
But yeah, it's a probabilistic argument. If all these places have problems, they all have problems. Let me assure you that companies have salary discrepancy and so on. So these things
for sure. So yes. Okay. Sorry. Sorry. I don't want to say anything general about Microsoft or MIT. I'm not saying, I actually do not know, I'm saying my own experience in how I felt in these institutions. So I'm sure, MIT is a big institution and Microsoft is a huge company. And my view of it is very, very local and very small. The fact that I feel good does not mean that random or women feels good at these places. So of course, I didn't mean to imply that. I'm just saying my own personal experience in these places. And I think it's because we look in MIT currently in the crypto group, there are more women than men. It's women dominated. That's a fact. At Microsoft, I think there are a lot of women. So I'm just in places where my statistics are different, than most places. I'm lucky.
Microsoft has more than 20% research, females in research?
No, my own specific, I'm talking about my New England, which is like 20 of them. We have a lot of women. So I'm talking about, I don't know, but I would, if I had to guess, I would say probably close to 50. I mean, a lot. I don't know. It doesn't feel biased. You sit in a room and there's a lot of women. I can count and tell you, but it's quite a bit of, and the women there are very strong. The head of the lab was always a woman. like our MacArthur genius is a woman. Our, you know, the women are strong. I don't know. We have very good and strong women, and also the men that are there are also fabulous. I don't know. I really, and you know, they were hired that way because think who started this lab was Jennifer Chase. So who would she hire? You know, it's a place where she made a place that's very comfortable for. I think that was one of her agendas. You know, when she started this place.
So I'll finish this. This is the last point that I want to make, that I want to say that definitely I think that our area has been blessed because we had Shafi all along from the beginning. I'm not her student, the three of you are, but even for me, when I was doing my PhD, Shafi was already the biggest thing around. And even for me, it was a huge thing. So I do want to finish by saying, Shafi, thank you. Big, huge, like in Pretty Woman, you know, when she says, big mistake.
Big mistake.
Huge.
Huge mistake.